Solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul. The feast of Saints Peter and Paul, or Solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul, is celebrated in honor of the martyrdom of the apostles in Rome, observed on June 29th. Saint Peter and Saint Paul are the patron saints of Rome. Both share the same feast day, as these two were one, even though they suffered on different days. Peter went first and Paul followed. Simon, called Peter, was born in Bethsaida near the Sea of Galilee. He was a fisherman by trade. Simon and his brother Andrew were the first whom Jesus invited to follow him. Jesus saw Simon and Andrew fishing and called them, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." Both brothers dropped everything and became Jesus' first disciples. In the Gospel of Matthew, he said, "I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the netherworld shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Refer to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 18 and 19. Peter emerged as the central leader of the church after Pentecost. He spent about a decade in Jerusalem, preaching powerfully, performing miracles, and converting many. He eventually traveled to Rome, where he established a church and became its first bishop. Around the year 64, he was martyred during the persecutions of Emperor Nero. Tradition states that Peter requested to be crucified upside down because he did not consider himself to be worthy of dying the same way Jesus died. His tomb is located under the main altar of St. Peter's Basilica. Saul, who was later called Paul, was born as a Roman citizen in Tarsus, the modern day Turkey. After Jesus' ascension into heaven, Saul became one of the fiercest persecutors of the early church. He was partly responsible for the death of the pro-martyr Saint Stephen. However, within a few years, as Saul was traveling to Damascus to persecute other Christians, he was knocked down to the ground and struck blind. He heard Jesus say to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" Jesus then directed him to a disciple of the Lord in Damascus named Ananias, who baptized Saul. Saul spent in Arabia intense time of prayer and study, eventually returning to Damascus and then to Jerusalem, where Barnabas introduced him to the other disciples, testifying to the veracity of his conversion. In Jerusalem, Saul began to use his Roman name Paul, and then spent approximately the next 10 years as a missionary throughout the Mediterranean. Back in Jerusalem, he was imprisoned for a couple of years and then was sent to Rome for trial, since he was a Roman citizen. In Rome, he met up with Saint Peter. According to tradition, Paul was beheaded just outside the city of Rome. When his head fell to the ground, it bounced 3 times, each time giving rise to a spring of water. The place is marked today by the Abbey of the Three Fountains. Saints Peter and Paul are considered the foundational pillars of the church. Peter represents the stability of the church and the office of the Vicar of Christ. Paul represents the mission of evangelization that was entrusted to the church by Jesus himself. He was also the church's first theologian, which is seen in his numerous letters that expound on the Gospels. Their martyrdom reminds us that the church must be both stable and mission oriented. It must remain grounded in the ancient truth, yet grow and flower with an ongoing understanding of the mysteries of faith. We honor these two pillars of the church, that though they are great saints, they were also ordinary men called to do extraordinary vocations. Saint Peter and Saint Paul pray for us.